Welcome, 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 everybody. We're so happy to have you here. Welcome, welcome. And got a couple folks coming on into the room. Welcome, welcome. Ooh, we got folks turning their cameras on too. Hey, y'all. It's good to see your face. Oh, Diana, thank you for tilting your camera. I enjoyed your bangs, but I would like to see all of your face. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience. We always like to begin our Midday Cafe Zoomcast with updates to let you all know what is going on in our IEA Great Lakes region and anywhere near a lake chapter of the International Enneagram Association. And y'all, we have, this is like the most robust group of teachers and practitioners that are a part of our board and a part of our chapter, and everybody has something going on. So I'm really excited. I'm gonna drop some links in the chat. I'm gonna walk through the experiences that we have, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Claire because she has a really special announcement that she's gonna make. The first thing I wanna announce though is that, man, Rosemary Hurwitz, who is a hoot and a half, has the Enneagram and Angels workshop happening with the Infinity Foundation in Highland Park, Illinois. That's going on today. So I'll drop the link in the chat if you are interested in, that's going to be happening at 12:30 CST today. So 30 minutes after we sign off, you can log in. There is the Enneagram of Institute of Ohio has multiple offerings. We'll drop the link there.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah.
Can someone hit record?
We've already hit record.
Oh, you're awesome.
That's Marissa. Marissa is on it. She is on it. You know, Rosemary also has an Enneagram group that meets monthly, the last Tuesday of each month. We have Dr. Lori Tate, who's going to guide us through taking a closer look at the characters and story of Advent using the Enneagram and Holy Scripture. And I love how the scriptures and the Enneagram types always seem to harmonize and find reflection in each other. Catherine Grant has a workshop called Sail the Wine Dark Sea, which I love. I have some offerings. I think that everybody that I have talked to in the last 2 months is going through some kind of exhaustion, some kind of burnout. And so I'm offering what I call Winter Solstice Rest. It's a series of wellness and contemplative practices that are designed to boost energy, relieve stress. All you need to do is log in and lay down. And so I'll drop that link. We're going to be meeting every Wednesday, starting next Wednesday, the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, November the 30th, and going until about mid-December. So I'll drop that link, as well as lots of trainings and certifications. And so if you've been studying the Enneagram and you're like, man, I have read the books, but I really want to get, certified and really get access to a teacher that can teach me not only how to teach the Enneagram, but how to leverage it as I am helping folks where I am in my context. There are some amazing trainings and certifications. I actually am leading a Learn to Teach the Enneagram certification and an Enneagram Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility certification. Both of these will happen in 2023. So I'll drop the links to those. They are hybrid. They're in person and online. And then I want to mention our founder and our board chair emeritus, Dr. Jerry Wagner, who is hosting the Enneagram Spectrum Training and Certification. He has a part 1 and a part 2. Part 2 is happening on January the 10th and going through February 16th. And then Claire, tell us about what you have going on over there with Motions of the Soul, with your spiritual direction school. Tell us, how can we get deeper in our harmony and help everybody else do the same thing?
Oh, well, this is our good work to do in the world, is to integrate this brilliant intellect, emotional intelligence, and instinctual intelligence so that we can show up as whole people in a very fragmented world. And so, there's a lot of need for breathing, even as Danielle says, we're exhausted. You sent a great newsletter out this week, Danielle. You should drop that in the chat.
Okay.
I think that one of the things we want to say is, even right now, who is not on this call that could use to be here. And go ahead and snag the link from the chat bar. We can put that in, Marissa, if you wouldn't mind doing that. Put the link to this call in the chat bar and invite your friends. Say, hey, you might want to come over and have a conversation. So of course, Motions of the Soul is the training that I provide. It's an IEA accredited training that is the intro and moves possibly for people who are desiring to study the art and practice of spiritual direction with the Enneagram. And with some of the most brilliant psychologists you've ever met on our faculty, like Jerome Wagner and Shar Dillon, and other brilliant, spiritual directors and theologians and people who have experienced spiritual direction during trauma, that are some of our exemplars that come and tell us about what it's like to receive spiritual direction from someone who knows the Enneagram and who is integrating the practices of head, heart, and gut, thinking, feeling, and doing, and how it's an invitation for people to be whole. So there you go. There's that's going on. And let me just say that today I'm really excited about having Suzanne Dion again with us. And because you can't do this book in one bite. Okay. So this is years of research and the work that Suzanne did with our beloved Dr. David Daniels, that brilliant psychiatrist who for decades taught the Enneagram and has guided people into health and wholeness and integration. And, when I met Suzanne, I liked her immediately. She just has that energy, like this welcoming, I want to be with you kind of energy. And when I found out that she was working with the Enneagram Prison Project, I knew that it wasn't just the people that were like me or like you, but there were other people like me and you that were also incarcerated. And she gave herself to the incarcerated community in ways that were healing and whole alongside Dr. Daniels. And then with the research that they did, she has curated it. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite chapters here today, the Enneagram and gender. And so, years ago, there was an interview with Diane Sawyer with a person who had transitioned, that when that person described their experience as a young person and then transitioning from being male to female, I had this quickening and I thought, I think this person was a 4 male and loved the silk fabrics in his mother's closet, but that was not acceptable in a very culturally male home where the father wanted this person to really move in a very classically cultural male context. And I just wondered about that. I wondered how many times we have, because of our cultural context, hurt people in their way of being in the world, and some people feeling like their only options were to take other routes, that if they knew themselves as they were made, as Nelson Mandela would say, with their inherent greatness, and not this idea of being other or don't fit or ostracized in any way. I wonder if we could create a more compassionate community for people to do their own inner work, their own discovery of who they are. In my tradition, we would say the Imago Dei, made in God's image. And so I just want to say that I'm so happy to have you again, Suzanne, because you and Dr. Daniels put some science into this work along with much heart. And I think we always say that Dr. Daniels was one of the most compassionate thinkers that the world has ever known. And I see this kind of thoughtful, compassionate work that you've done even in this gender. And so we welcome you today to let it fly. But what I want to say to all of us is breathe, because you may hear things that have you curious. You may hear things that might constrict you and make you want to stop listening. You may want to shut off the Zoom and run away and only take one or two sentences from this that may not be helpful without the full context. So I just want us to practice the kind of self-care that if you feel at a moment that you're triggered and you're unable to listen to Suzanne as she presents, just know it's okay. You don't have to agree. And you don't have to, she's not trying to convert you to her thinking. What she is offering us is a way to offer compassionate presence to people. And that is the work of this day. So let's just take a breath. And, some of you have a breathing practice in the form of a breath prayer that helps you connect to the truest thing about you. That is, you are a person made and created and recreated in love. And that at any moment we can return to that truth, that we have been created and are being recreated in love as we're open and receptive. Some of us might want to breathe with that kind of functional neurobiological wisdom of the 1-to-2 ratio of in to 4, out to 8, and swallow. And Dr. Libba taught us that actually helps us activate both rest and digest. So if we're feeling a little out there or fragmented or fearful, shameful, or guilty, we can just return to the breath. Into 4, out to 8, and swallow. And just notice what it feels like to be here now. Held in love and offering love. And know that you can return here anytime. And when you feel able to come to the screen, we'll welcome Suzanne and all the other friends on the screen that we haven't seen in a bit. And remembering some that aren't with us today, but will follow us on the YouTube channel once we're finished. And Suzanne, thank you so much for your generosity and coming back to our little crew. Can you all say thank you to Suzanne? If you're off camera, you can flip up a heart or something, but we welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to be welcomed by your community again. And I just want to say that my opportunity, the chance in a lifetime to get to work so closely with Dr. David Daniels and to have been his comrade in writing this book at the end of his life, which was, really kind of the seminal passion that he had to tie the Enneagram to relationships. And, he was all about minimizing the unnecessary suffering that we all endure inside of ourselves, the system of self and the way we suffer who we are and the way we suffer one another. And the way that he came to use this beautiful system called the Enneagram to try to minimize and decrease the amount of pain and disconnection and dislocation that we felt from one another, which starts from the disconnection and dislocation of self. And I in my coaching that's ensued since writing the book and the different work that I did, of course, working in the Enneagram Prison Project with Susan Olesic for years and her husband, and going in and teaching and working with the incarcerated. We became trauma-informed Enneagram teachers and addiction-informed Enneagram teachers, because we could not just bring the Enneagram into that environment without understanding the developmental complex trauma that these inmates and the incarcerated endured just about 100% of the time. So when you go in and think, oh, they know those people are just making bad choices and they're just awful people and they're just born that way. Well, we certainly learned that that wasn't the case, that the amount of trauma that was experienced by people that find themselves behind bars it was so extraordinary. My imagination couldn't even come up with some of the stories that I heard. I had no idea that that's what some childhoods would possibly look like, and why and how someone would come to be a murderer, and how they were actually early victims. And I tell you, it blew my heart wide open working with this population. And I will also say I was absolutely terrified to go into this population. And I told Susan, listen, I'll do the marketing and I'll do the branding, and you just keep going inside there, because what am I going to do as a blue-eyed white girl going into that environment? But what I found was not hatred and cruelty. I found people starving for truth, starving to understand why they did what they did, starving to understand how to be received and how to be met, and just starving for someone to care about what happened to them. And so going back to our experience with Enneagram Prison Project and my work with David, and David's compassionate heart is how he became to use the Enneagram to build compassion for the self first and compassion for others. And someone in one of our programs raised their hand one time and he goes, wow, now that I've learned the Enneagram, how do I possibly get mad at anybody? Because now I understand that our defense mechanisms are there to protect us. And actually a lot of what we see acted out on ourselves and one another, it's not that we're trying on purpose to be difficult or to be disagreeable or to shut down or withdraw. We can't help it. That the defense system is part of our protection system. The defense system forms through all kinds of adaptive strategies that we've needed to deploy since we were very young to initially just survive the attachment relationship that we found ourselves in once we landed in the world. These attachment caregivers were everything to us, and we had to adapt to our needs not being met, or our boundaries being violated, or our personhood not being seen the way we wanted to be seen, or being seen by a parent that wanted us to be something different than we were. And the Enneagram helps build compassion for my divine greatness, my divine wiring, my divine central nervous system, my divine spirit. And from looking at the Enneagram from a scientific background, which is what David Daniels and Dan Siegel and David's daughter, who has a PhD in temperament, they're looking at it from a scientific background. And then we've got A.H. Almas, who's looking at it from a spiritual perspective, from the old holy ideas, actually transmitting and informing some kind of coherent, divine, particular spark in each of us that carries out a particular beautiful set of gifts and purpose in this world. So whether we have the spiritual view or the scientific view, the Enneagram comes to teach us that we are beautifully different. And there's 9 Enneagram types, not 2. There's 9 Enneagram personality temperaments, proclivities, and propensities, not 2, not Venus and Mars, not just female and male, but 9. And this is really the basis of the discussion today, that learning the Enneagram just might be something that will help to support our understanding of the self system of different individuals, and why certain Enneagram types, particularly there's a big struggle with men in 3 particular Enneagram types that tend to more readily think I must be in the wrong body because I don't have these other proclivities and propensities. My personality is more sensitive, more empathic, more withdrawn, more tender. Oh, I must be in the wrong body. Well, maybe there's a little bit more going on that we can look at and use the Enneagram to have a lot more compassion for these discrepancies and these, I'm going to call it for temporarily right now, a disorder of self, where I feel like I must be made wrong, which is for me as a mother, one of the most heartbreaking things I can ever imagine. That I might have heard from my child. And I didn't hear that from my child, but to have your child say, I'm made wrong, I'm in the wrong body, I don't know who I am, I'm miserable. What a terrifying experience that must be for those who feel that or are suffering that experience, and also for the parents and caregivers that are trying to navigate these waters right now in this very difficult time.
Yeah. And so I just want to breathe because I feel that, so deeply. And all of us who are open and curious and realize we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes we've remained silent in this conversation. Sometimes we've remained overly zealous on one side or the other, and basically gave a speak to the hand kind of experience to those who were expressing what they were seeing in their own lives or in the lives of those they've loved. And so I think you and I talked about this, about the Venus and Mars. That was one of the early things as a pastor that, just put my teeth a little bit on edge, was seeing that even in churches, we were training people to be even farther separated in their maleness or femaleness. And being a female 3, I felt the energy of a more assertive type. And in some places that was less welcome. And so, and then my husband, who is a 9, pastor, and the 2 of us, co-pastor together, he has a far more embracing and nourishing and moving away approach with people that is really, healthy when it's healthy, and mine is really healthy when it's healthy. And so, but again, those are not the classic cultural stereotypes of, male and female. But the Enneagram named it. So, yeah. And, I just want you to see how starred up and dog-eared this chapter is for me. And I really love the idea around life force, emotional navigation, object relations, all of these things that actually, if we're enacting ourselves as whole and holy people, right, that we can actually come into the world with a lead style, but we are more than that. But if someone has shamed us, we may have shut down even the ability to access these other parts of ourselves that can help make sense of what doesn't make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm certainly not a researcher myself. I'm not a medical doctor. I just happen to be an Enneagram teacher and a mother, but I'm also a deeply compassionate person about how we suffer from the inside out, starting with our very earliest experiences all the way in our childhood of just defining who I am and all of the needs that have to be met for that secure attachment to happen. And when we've got these attachment disturbances and we've got trauma through our, big T trauma, as everybody knows, right? The ACE studies, the big T trauma, the adverse childhood experiences studies. And then we've got small t trauma, which is a really fascinating thing to start understanding when we start looking at the system of self, in that when I'm not recognized or loved or taken a delight in just as I am, I'm feeling a pressure or shaming to be something different. And I'll tell you, there's one way we can control another human being really fast is to start shaming them and abandoning them separating from them if they don't behave the way we want them to behave. This is really powerful. And of course, this happens a lot in our society. This happens on the school ground. This happens in the schoolyard. And what causes this to happen to us is if we don't fit societal norms for who we are told we are supposed to be. And of course, it's been split into this male, gender stereotypes by culture is one of the fastest ways we're supposed to identify who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to act. Well, if our particular personality naturally fits to those social constructs, we can feel kind of like I'm okay. Like it can engender a lot of self-acceptance. But if my particular personality doesn't fit with these particular social constructs of the body that I'm in, then the shaming and non-self-acceptance can become very painful. And it can include, additionally, a lot of bullying, a lot of non-acceptance, a lot of chastising as the moment we go to school. And it can also create a lot of problems inside our family system. So I'll tell you a story about a little type 4. And I'm going to just caveat this by saying type 9, type 2, and type 4 males tend to really struggle with male gender stereotypes. I'll go into that in a second. But type 4 is a very emotional child, it's a very sensitive child, it's a very colorful child, it's a very expressive child. It comes to find its authentic truth. Expressing myself as who I really am must be met with being heard and being seen in my authentic self. These children tend to be very creative. They tend to be more withdrawn. They're very sensitive, and these little boys, when they go to school, are real targets for traumatized children who turn into bullies. So long story short, I've got a little type 4 male. His father is a sexual subtype type 6. So strength, power, I'm going to be completely independent. And the father keeps putting him in football and soccer. He's trying to toughen him up, basically. This is the dad is trying to toughen up this little guy. So he gets him on the football field. He's about 9 years old, 9 or 10. And he goes to pick him up after football. And he says to the coach, "Where's my kid?" And the coach is like looking around. He's not with all the other boys tackling and scrimmaging and all of this. And they see the little boy way off in the corner, and he's chasing a butterfly. And they, oh, there's my son, not playing football, but he's chasing a butterfly. So this child who is fascinated with nature and beautiful things and very sensitive has got a father who absolutely wants him to be different. Now here begins the dislocation of self. This little boy is going to struggle accepting himself. His father's not accepting him, trying to get him to be different, not realizing, oh my goodness, my son is a 4. And actually the son ends up picking up guitar, wants to play music, is drawing constantly, illustrating the world, very artistic. But dad wants me to be something different. And there were a lot of developmental problems that have ensued through this child's teen years, a lot of confusion. But type 4, type 2, type 9, the more sensitive, whether you're male or female, you've got a lot of empathy, you have more other referencing, you have more withdrawing into your emotional system. If you're a type 4, you have giving and helping and other accommodation as a 2. You have, as a 9, I'm going to go along, I'm going to merge into what others want, I'm going to be really agreeable, I tend to be smiling a lot, I don't like roughhousing, I don't like fighting, I don't want to, I don't tend to be terribly assertive. I tend to be more pulled back, what might even be called passive. These boys get teased, they get shamed, and they just feel like they don't fit in. Going to type 4, type 4 males like to peacock a lot. They like to feel heard, seen, and desired. And the desire to be desired tends to be associated more with the female stereotype of, we're going to dress pretty, put on our makeup, and then someone will desire us. Well, when you're a boy and you want that same experience, and that's not supported in our society, now what happens to you? most little boys say, I don't know they're type 4. The dislocation and disconnection of my authentic self happens, and the cognitive dissonance between who I feel I am and who society expects me to be creates an incredible amount of tension. And this tension now seems to have been highlighted with a medical solution, with pretty severe solutions of what they're calling affirmative care, where a child is able to very young diagnose themselves as the problem being my body, and that my self-identity is completely different than my body. My body has been defined by society's expectations of who I'm supposed to be in this body. You can see how the confusion has gotten pretty incredibly advanced. And the solutions that we've come up with in just the last 10 years is extraordinary. And and again, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not any of those things. I'm just a concerned citizen, an Enneagram teacher, and a mom, observing these dislocations of self being turned into these extremely intervening solutions that in most cases have irreversible damages and effects on young people who are making these decisions before the brain is even completely developed, before causal thinking has come online, where I can assess if I really want to be infertile, if I really want to lose my genitalia, if I really want to transition into another cosmetically engineered body, into a different body, and what's going to happen to my self system through this whole process. And that hasn't been taken into consideration. And now we've got this huge movement of detransitioners who are still suffering the same dislocations of self, the same disorientations that they were struggling with before. And I don't want to say that not all people that transition are miserable. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I think there have been success stories where it really has eased the discomfort of the cognitive dissonance they were struggling with. But I am tremendously concerned with these decisions being made so young, without an understanding of the trauma that's been experienced, not understanding the temperament that's actually in front of us. That might be a consideration here. And that the damages that are so irreversible and lifelong might not be considered as deeply and as necessarily, because the brain is so young, the mind is so young, the development is still in process. So I'm here today as a concerned Enneagrammer and a concerned citizen and parent, looking at these extraordinary solutions that have been medicalized, that really might be more dealt with more lovingly and compassionately by going in and working with the system of self. And that's what I think the Enneagram can be, an incredible tool and aid for all of us to be doing, if we can bring the Enneagram to the world and into this population and into this conversation.
Well, and so I just want to say thank you for being a concerned citizen, and also writing with Dr. Daniels this chapter on gender. And would you feel free to say what the conversations were with this brilliant medical doctor, psychiatrist, Enneagram, one of the greats that we stand on his shoulders, right? Can you say what the conversations were like as you were writing chapter 8?
Yeah, we were talking about energy. And at that time, David had started working with Dr. Dan Siegel, Dr. Laura Baker, Dr. Jack Killen, and David's daughter has a PhD in temperament. Now, does that not say a lot, that she was seeing that the Enneagram had particular temperamental proclivities, patterns, and propensities? Now, what does that mean? It means that they used to say a long time ago, well, how did your childhood make you your Enneagram type? And they actually, when I started working with Dan and David was getting into the science. David was an empirical psychiatrist at Stanford University. David has been a medical doctor. And of course, he's seeing the physiology, he's seeing the biology, and he knows there's a neurobiological underpinning to why do some people's anger come flying out of their body and other people's anger gets contained. Now, that's not a choice any of us made when we were 3 years old. That's something my body did for me. I happen to be a type 1 on the Enneagram. I can contain, it just goes like this. Am I locked down? I can't speak. My solar plexus is like a rock, you know. Honestly, I think ballet was designed by a type 1, all this, and the lockdown and the no breathing. But anyway, so I'm a container, and that happened to me from as far back as I can remember. I would lock up, and I can remember being with my little girlfriend in first grade. And when she got upset, she would just haul out and start speaking, and she was fierce. And I was like, wow, I'd like to be like that, but I couldn't be like that. My body wouldn't let me be like that until, fast forward 40 years later, and I'm in the Enneagram community, and I'm starting to, through mindfulness work and self-witnessing work, start developing more capacity to stay present to my anger, not censor, realign, and, go into reaction formation where I suddenly become this smiley, appropriate person when I'm angry instead of authentic. So I'm learning this. It took me 10 years to open up my own central nervous system's contraction around anger, so I could have a different response. I could actually show up more authentically, but I had to work on it. Otherwise, my body was going to keep containing, shutting me down, reorganizing me into something more appropriate. And that's pretty much what happens to type 1. And I would have walked around with my tight jaw forever. So going back to these propensities, proclivities, and patterns that organize our developmental pathways. There's something already designed in us. The central nervous system is sort of organized a certain way to process incoming impressions and work with the information and data coming from the inside and express it outward or contain it inward. This is part of our temperamental design, which is what they now believe organizes you toward developing a particular Enneagram set of patterns versus another one. Why did I not become an 8? Why am I a containing type 1? So now we get to understand compassionately that we're wired a little bit differently. And to tell an 8, I'm so tired of you yelling at me and getting so direct so fast. I want you to stop that. And then 3 days later, our type 8 partner gets overly expressive again, not because they didn't love us and they didn't hear us. It's because the capacity in the body won't allow something different yet. And how to start having compassion for the different ways we express ourselves, the different ways we can't express ourselves, not on purpose. It's a capacity issue. So now we go to a type 8. Let's talk about a type 8 female for a moment. Actually, type 8s, type 7s, and type 3s on the Enneagram. They're the 3 assertive, more aggressive, move toward life, go get what you want, take what you want, make what you want happens. And oftentimes women that are 3s, 7s, and 8s get a really bad rap. Right? You're supposed to be demure. We're supposed to be kind, supposed to be sweet, supposed to be accommodating. We're supposed to sit and wait, right? We're supposed to be nice girls. And I know I have several type 8 female friends who have been called the B word and have been told they're too much, and the sorrow and the pain and the suffering they experience in our society from being too much, from being too masculine. A lot of them were tomboys when they were little girls. They were climbing trees. They were up on the roof. They were blowing up firecrackers. They were doing a lot of things that the little boys were doing. It didn't mean they were in the wrong body. It just meant they were a little type 8. And to be able to acknowledge these 9 different temperaments through the developmental stages and knowing what to expect as a parent in what I would call Enneagram informed parenting can absolutely allow us to take a delight in the different temperamental nature of these 9 little kids rather than trying to distort them into what we want or shunning them when they don't fit these societal gender norms, which not accepting a child as they are, not giving them attention for who they are. You know, attention is one of the most valuable currencies we have for development. Abandoning them by putting them in timeouts for being too rambunctious, too loud, or too something. And, you know, organizing conditional love patterns in the family, that if you don't behave the way I want you to behave, you're going to get cut off from my attention for 3-4 hours, you know, etc. All of these, you can tell I'm really into the parenting piece of this. All of this creates dislocation from the authentic self, which can lead to disorders of the self, disorders of the self system, and all of the incredible amount of anxiety and depression right now in our teenagers, which has skyrocketed. That in the last 10, this generation Z, which is what, 1997 to 2012, the amount of anxiety and depression is off the chain. The amount of medication giving to young people to medicate this just complete dislocation of self. And you know, for all of us who are a little older, when we remember our own puberty, I mean, puberty is rough. It is really scary. Just even 40 years ago, right? It was really scary, let alone today, when, you know, the difficulty you're having in puberty just might be that your body's all wrong, and all of the body dysmorphia, the social media inundation of images that have been filtered and perfected. And, you know, you stand in a mirror as a 14-year-old girl and you don't look like that. Of course, we don't look like that. Nobody looks like that. You know, it's got to be horrifying for a young brain. And again, I cannot advocate enough the use of the Enneagram to understand different temperamental wirings, different natural proclivities, which I would love to see some research done. And David and I used to talk about this, that, you know, it seems that 8s have got more testosterone. 7s have got a ton of dopamine. 3s have got a ton of dopamine. 6s are running super high levels of adrenaline and cortisol. And just to see these biochemical differences that lend themselves to the way our personalities are showing up in the world, it's like, that would be such a beautiful thing. And for us to have under our belt as Enneagrammers and teachers and thought leaders to have the biology, right? The neurochemistry to...
And yes, melatonin. Anyway, we could go on with that. And so you've named the feminine energy, the masculine energy, if, you know, giving it that kind of language. But fortunately, in chapter 8, you do other things that help us unpack what we're really looking at. Because I am a female, and I'm super happy in this body. And I'm also an Enneagram 3 who was told I talk too much in school. And fortunately, I had a dad who said, I'm not worried about the ones that talk too much. I want to know what the ones who don't talk are thinking. So, you know, so fortunately, that was there wasn't this polarization of female and assertive in my growing up years. But I wonder about what were, you know, the other 3 types, and how you would name the other 3 types.
Yeah, so let me take you around the wheel, and as David, being a medical doctor, how he saw the energy neurobiologically. But I'll start with type 8, of course, is gender orientation is male. The energy is male. It's the go-getter, very aggressive, very assertive. 8s have a fight response that's expressed first under threat. And that is also very male-oriented. Type 9 is called gender neutral, leaning female. So the type 9 proclivities of pulling in, neutralizing, I don't want to be a burden, to go along and get along, never say no if I'm asked, tends to orient towards female stereotypes in our society. Moving to type 1, David also considered this gender neutral, but leaning male. Type 1s have linear, organized, contained, measured, disciplined, and are more seen as kind of a male non-emotive, non-expressive type, the type that is more linear, structured, disciplined. Type 1, even though we're in the gut center of intelligence, can look really heady because the suppression of the self sends the energy to the head to try to organize a new response. This is the reaction formation of type 1. So they can look very heady when they're actually still in the gut. Type 2, gender female stereotype. So type 2 is actually the organized around the archetype of Venus, the lover, the nurturer, the caregiver, the sweetness, type 2s are on this planet taking care of the rest of us and are seen in hospice, seen in nursing. They are the caregivers of the Enneagram system. Type 3 is gender neutral leaning male. And actually, because it's assertive, it's a go-getter type, it's a show up and be seen. And type 3s are very active. This is not a passive energy. This is a go-getter energy, even though type 3s are deeply sensitive to the impressions they're making on others. I love Russ Hudson's work as he talks about how type 3s carry the lost dreams of the parents in their heart, and they want to become the hero of the family to heal the family. So it's a very archetypal hero energy and tends to be more male. Type 4 is gender female. So it takes on more of the female stereotypes of emotiveness, of emotional expression, of sensitivity. Type 4 tends to be, I am because I feel me. And what's unique about type 4 in the heart center of intelligence is that the feeling center is oriented toward the self, unlike type 2, where the feeling center is oriented toward others. And type 3's feeling center, actually, they suppress feelings for themselves. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to take care of the task. But 4, the feelings go into, how do I feel? What's happening inside of me? And can be very kind of it's a feelings oriented experience of the world, type 4. Type 5 is considered gender male. And type 5s are, now we're really in the head, logical, clinical, information-based, information-driven. They tend to be less emotional. As a matter of fact, types 5 withdraw from a lot of emotions. They have a lot of boundaries around emotions. They need to be by themselves to even feel emotions. They don't talk about emotions a lot, and they tend to fit very well in the male stereotype for our society. Type 6, now this is really interesting. Type 6 goes both ways. Type 6 has the counterphobic style and the phobic style. And David referred to these as gender neutral. However, type 6 phobic style lends itself more to the female stereotype, checking with others, not making their own decisions, needing some support, kind of being unsure of a lot of things, doubting themselves. That can be associated more with what we would accept more in a female. And if you take a phobic male style, who's doubting himself when he makes decisions, not sure of what he's going to do, checking back, hesitancy, that's not associated as much with our male stereotype. Counterphobic 6, however, is associated with male energy, and the counterphobic 6 style of going head on into fear. What's fear? I'm going to deal with it. What's fear? I'm going to challenge it. Very much applauded in our society for male behavior. And it's when it's seen in female behavior that we've got this fear attacking, fear conquering female. It's like, wow, but we don't expect it necessarily with our societal gender stereotypes for females. Type 7 is gender neutral leaning male. And again, 3, 7, and 8 are the assertive, go get it, get what you want, take what you need. You know, type 7s, I love the type 7 proclivity because they have got such a connection to their own true desire. Like they shamelessly pursue their desire without guilt, without being ashamed of it. They have a self-centered nature that they're almost proud of. And when we see this in females, we don't applaud it. When we see this in males, we're like, you go, guy, right? So that's a trip around the whole system. And you can see that there's some types leaning more female in the natural design of the self. And there's some that naturally lean more male in the orientation to the world and the emotional system. And then there's some that are a little bit more neutral, but leaning one way or the other. So again, when we find ourselves at the type 7, assertive, take what you want from life and go get it, and sorry I wasn't taking care of you, we don't associate that with we don't allow our women to be that. And what happens is what we shame, we ostracize, we've got little funny labels and names for each other when we don't fit these stereotypes. And when we get into intimate romantic relationships, we can be really hard on each other in this arena. If we don't understand someone's different Enneagram type. And, Claire, you're married to a 9, and, that type 9 men bring such incredible things to our society because they're male and they're 9, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we even use the word for Scott sometimes that he's benign. That in conversations, he's not a triggering presence classically, right? Yeah. And but that's where it's where he begins. It's where he leads, is with 9. But there's also this with the work of the harmony triads, the ability to access his 6 and 3 in all of his inherent greatness. Not saying when I'm under stress, I go here, and when I'm relaxed, I go here. But no, I have resources that I can pick up that can really give me, wholeness and energetic alignment and, and psychological, emotional, and physical health. Yeah. So, yeah. And so I do think, because we have that in common too, we love the harmony, and we love the yes. Yes. And so even in that, I come from, to go to theology for just a minute, I come from a faith background that sees God as Trinity. And so there is this deference between head, heart, gut, Father, Son, Spirit, thinking, feeling, doing, male, female, and neutral, because sometimes the Holy Spirit shows up in our sacred text as being gender neutral or gender female, which is really lovely. It helped me belong to this sacred text in a different way than if I felt like it was a boys' club and a patriarchal system, but it was more of an inclusive, deferential kind of wisdom. And of course, then the golden thread in my faith tradition is to love God with mind, heart, and strength, right? Yeah. So IQ, EQ, and GQ. Yeah. So when I think about even the beauty of our text in Genesis that says, let us make humans in our image, there's even, people will freak out about such things, but this is the fullness of humanity, the fullness of the Imago Dei, that we have access to more than what we lead with, that we have access when we're well and not constricted or contracted around one energy of moving toward, away, or against, male, female, or neutral in these ways. So I just think this is one of my books. We're using it in our School of Spiritual Direction. I want you to know, Suzanne, you and Dr. Daniels are teaching from afar, and it is one of the books that we use. And I do want to say to our friends here, I'm wondering if you have questions. They're very silent today. One friend said, I would like to just breathe and read the chapter, which is so good. Randy is asking, how early can we begin to see the Enneagram types in children? And I know some of you have to go right at 1:00, and maybe you do also, Suzanne, but can you answer that question?
No, I'm fine. I just want to add to what you said, and let me answer that question. It's, David was all about starting with the acceptance of the self. And acceptance meaning just to witness it, see our natural proclivities, see that for me, see that I contain anger. I wasn't less than my girlfriend who expressed her anger. I contain it. And that's a gift in my particular central nervous system that has an evolutionary quality that helped some kind of survival along the generations, along the centuries. Why do some of us contain? Why do some of us express? These are intelligent systems, right, for survival. So starting to honor and accept how I'm naturally wired is the beginning. And then realizing we can develop more resources internally, right? Definitely the harmony triads at, I'm a 147, the 369, and the 825. What a gift in understanding these object relations. I call them human architectures, or some kind of architecture for my purpose in the world. The identification of, I have to reframe my anger. I'm someone who never expresses my anger. That's the identification that locks us in to not gaining more resources. And on the flip side, the non-acceptance of other qualities also gets us in trouble, right? So this work of just opening up our capacities, allowing ourselves to work with our body, because it's all in the body, right? The way we express emotions, the way we contain emotions, the way we open up, the way we shut down. And to do that with a lot of love and compassion, starting with accepting how I'm wired. And then I can start expanding from there, which is why I love the Enneagram. Now, going to how early on can we see type? Well, David Daniels he matched the Enneagram to the research of Thomas and Chess, which was the research on temperamental proclivities in 3-month-old to 18-month-old children, which is where you can actually start to see temperamental differences in little humans. And I'll tell you, I have a daughter. She's now 27 years old. At 4 months old, I could see the assertive style in this little being. She was a master at getting my attention. And she would wiggle and she would move her arms. And so I knew I had a child that would reach toward. It was really fascinating. So we can see temperamental proclivities very early. Actually, you can see energetic qualities in children very early on. Little type 8 children, for example, it's all about power. They're on the power harmony triad, and they tend to walk into a room and push things. They want to see how heavy things are. They tend to knock things over. Like, how heavy am I? How heavy is this? They're challenging the world all the time. And they grow up feeling like they wreck things and ruin things because they were knocking over the vases and knocking over the chairs, and they were getting in trouble a lot just for this big exuberance, David would call it, this big, I'm going to challenge the space I'm in, versus, the little 4 child who walks into a room and sees a vase of flowers, and they're like just mesmerized with it, taking it in, touching the flowers, a completely different response to the environment. We can see this very early on. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. And I think even the accepting of the self and the accepting of the other, and how children can feel that from very early on, is our good work to do in the world. And so, I think about our grandchildren and, the one who is a 4, and saying, let's welcome she's got fabulous energy.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go, I could go on and on about it, but I won't. I just say, and I'll remind my son, always welcome that energy that she feels so deeply. And she can be she is a teardrop. She can drop tears about things. We stopped for a homeless man on Sunday, and we drove home. It was another 10 miles. And when we got home, she said, I'm still feeling really sad. And she named his name. Like, what can we do? So I just want to say that if we understood these proclivities, if we felt these energies, and in the space with children, and honored and helped them, gave them a good mirroring of acceptance that, you know, their inherent greatness is wanted here.
Yeah, and that's secure attachment, isn't it? So I securely attach to myself when I take delight in my own tendencies, as I'm a little force who can feel sad for a long time, to honor that sadness in them instead of, you're too sensitive, what's wrong with you? Those are the small t traumas that cause us to separate from the authentic self, start believing there's something wrong with me. It starts right there in these little conversations that we're having with our parenting caregivers, with our friends, with our teachers. Need to be personality informed. Can make a huge difference in not ending up with a 14-year-old that doesn't know who they are and thinks they're all wrong.
Well, Suzanne, I thank you. We're all breathing. We're all in need of Enneagram relationships and intimacy. If we're teaching the Enneagram, or if you just want to be a good human, there's real help here for us to be
more
good,
self-loving human, right? A more self-accepting human. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so, friends, you've gotten to hear even the work of both Suzanne and Dr. Daniels today. And we appreciate you and hope you'll come back again. And friends, you can reach Suzanne at, your website is Suzanne?
SuzanneDion.com.
Isn't that nice and simple? SuzanneDion.com. And we say we're in this country. I don't know if we have any other friends, but we celebrate the holiday of Thanksgiving, and I'll be bringing thanks for your presence into this season.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for this conversation. And, it's a scary one to have these days, but, it was wonderful to bring the Enneagram into it and hopefully open up a dialogue that can be helpful and useful at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us.